Tipp today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. Slattery'sGarage.ie.
Good morning, welcome along to Tipp Today, 1800 938 007. That's our free phone number. It won't cost you if you'd like to make a call to us. And Leanne is producing today. Thanks to Stephen for looking after you for the past week while I was toasting my toes. Coming up on the show this morning, global news with Thomas Conway in just a few moments' time. The Civil Society Coalition says sex for rent exploitation must be treated as a criminal offence. We'll have a reaction from Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin to the by-election results. HSE Drug Education Officer John Leahy will be with us live in studio. Financial expert Francis O'Hanlon will be with us. We'll also have the latest updates from the Moorhaven Centre in Tipperary Town, and Tipp FM examines the health of Tipperary. So all of that and much, much more on the way. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. You can email tiptoday@tippfm.com. Let's have a look at the front pages of some of your newspapers today. The Irish Independent, and in fact right across the newspapers there's analysis of the by-elections, but the Independent telling us that there are mounting fears in Fianna Fáil that the party has been turned into one entity with Fine Gael in the minds of voters. And Sean Kine pulled off a rare by-election win for the government party. The Fine Gael candidates surpassed Noel Thomas of Independent Ireland on the 11th count, as I'm sure you're aware at this point. The Irish Times, and again it's all about the by-election, and they're telling us that Fine Gael and the Social Democrats recorded morale-boosting victories in the Conway West and Dublin Central by-elections after lengthy counts at the weekend. Also reading on the Times today that billionaire businessmen John Magner and JP McManus could finally secure a bumper payday on their 2013 purchase of high-amenity Liffey Valley lands for just over $4 million through a housing rezoning proposal backed by the Chief Executive of South Dublin County Council. So there you go. Nice money if you can get it. The Irish Examiner, and again, making reference to the by-elections, Louise Byrne telling us that the Taoiseach Micheál Martin is facing further backlash from Fianna Fáil TDs who have branded him selfish, accusing him of damaging the party as part of his victory lap in the wake of dismal by-election performances. Also on the Examiner today, Ireland's cyber chief expects that cyber attacks during the Irish EU presidency will focus on trying to cause reputational damage to both the EU and the host nation, namely ourselves. Let's have a look at the Irish Daily Mail. And the Mail, again, by-election stuff, and their angle is the Sinn Féin angle, and they have a banner headline that says Sinn Féin is in turmoil after poor by-election outcome. A major infighting between left and right-wing factions has engulfed Sinn Féin in the wake of its disastrous by-election results at the weekend, according to the Mail. So let's look at what's making headlines today. If you want to make comment on any of that, once again, 083 311 3311, and that email is tiptoday@tippfm.com. It's time for Global News. Glad to be joined online now by Thomas Conway. Good morning to you, Thomas.
Good morning, Fran.
And good to talk to you today. Donald Trump defended himself against criticism from fellow Republicans on Sunday as he appeared to be on the verge of agreeing a deal with Iran to end the war, Thomas. But hawks in the party called the proposed agreement a disaster and questioned why the US president had launched the conflict in the first place. Again, more chaos around this, the possibility of a deal today, but nobody seems to know what that deal is going to contain.
Yes, so the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has suggested that a solid deal may come today. Trump yesterday indicated that a deal wasn't fully negotiated. He had earlier said it was, and the Iranians are kind of putting out mixed messages as well. I think it's very interesting what you alluded to there. Some of the hawks within the Republican Party, the likes of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Mike Pompeo, who was Trump's former Secretary of State, coming out against this deal. But I think almost the best barometer of where negotiations are is often the oil price. And that's where I looked at first this morning. it has come down to its lowest level in about 2 weeks amid hopes of a deal. So that suggests that there is a little bit of momentum, that a deal might be possible. Now, I understand that the deal under discussion would involve a couple of points. It's a 60-day ceasefire extension, effective from June 5th. And during that time, Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz. It would also be allowed to freely sell oil. And in exchange for that, America would lift certain sanctions. It would free as much as, I think, $20 billion of frozen assets. And there would be revived talks, I suppose, on Iran's nuclear program, which would take place in Pakistan from June 5th. So there does seem to be a bit of momentum here, but no real progress on the issue of the nuclear program. I mean, the talks for that have still been deferred to June 5th and after. So, yeah, it's interesting, but again, mixed messages from the White House.
But you can't help but point out, Thomas, that the Straits of Hormuz were open before America decided to bomb Iran. So he can't put this forward as being a victory, can he?
No, he really can't paint this as a win, and I think it was interesting that those senior Republicans came out to deride the deal that has been discussed. I mean, Trump felt an obligation last night to send out a post on Truth Social dismissing any kind of similarity between the deal his administration is trying to negotiate and the Obama negotiated nuclear deal in 2015, the JCPOA. So he's clearly been irked by criticism of the deal. But you're right. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz was open freely prior to the war. Iran seems to have discovered it as a key weapon in terms of their leverage now, not only over the United States, but over the world. Now, I understand a couple of ships have passed through the Strait over the course of the weekend. I also understand that the Turkish President Erdogan and the Egyptian President al-Sisi were on the phone to Trump on Saturday, lobbying him to strike a deal here, not to go in and strike Iran again. So it's very interesting. I'm not sure how it will play out in the coming days. I sense they are getting closer and closer to a deal. I think the fact that Rubio said it, and Rubio is always far more measured in his pronouncements and his statements, I think the fact that he said a solid deal may come true today might just indicate that they're onto something here.
And would that deal include Israel ending its offensive in Lebanon, for example, Thomas?
Yeah, that is a key question. I mean, Netanyahu is obviously seeking to, if anything, intensify his bombing campaign, but I don't think he would be in a position to refuse Donald Trump. I mean, there's a lot of commentary around the relationship between Israel and the US, and there's no doubt that Israel exerts significant influence over the Trump administration. But Trump has in the past leaned on Netanyahu. The Gaza ceasefire was, I suppose, one example. The previous war, I suppose, the 12-day war between Iran and Israel. So I think Netanyahu would be in no position but to accept what Trump asked him or Trump asked him to do. Now, he's in an interesting domestic political situation at home because the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, was effectively dissolved last week with a view to holding an election in October or September. I looked at an opinion poll this morning on Polymarket, and he's going to face a battle to remain PM. He's been Prime Minister for 20 of the last 30 years in Israel, and this will be his 12th general election campaign. He's 76, so he's under a little bit of domestic political pressure here. But to the substantive issue, will he continue his bombing campaign in Lebanon? I think he will be forced to do whatever Trump asks him to do.
And what about another of Trump's senior officials again walking here, Tulsi Gabbard, for example? Would you just tell me about Tulsi Gabbard? Would you just remind us?
Yeah, she has a fascinating backstory, really. A late convert to the Republican Party, if you want to call it that. She was a Democratic representative until 2022. She had done some kind of bizarre things in terms of foreign policy. She had met with Bashar al-Assad in 2017, but she eventually left the Democratic Party, went into the political wilderness for a while, and subsequently joined the Republicans and became an acolyte of Donald Trump. And she represented the anti-war faction within MAGA. That was her her core philosophy. And she was appointed Director of National Intelligence, which is quite a high role within the U.S. intelligence agencies. It's at the head of one, but there was a lot of skepticism when she was appointed to that role, that she was incompetent, that she was ill-equipped for the role. She went out and defended Donald Trump earlier in the year. She kind of made contradictory statements. She said last year that Iran wasn't developing a nuclear weapon. Trump then contradicted her earlier in the year when he went to war with Iran, and she defended him. But there's been a lot of controversy around her, and from what I understand, she was, to quote officials, out of the loop in terms of the decision-making process in the White House. Now, it should be said that she, her stated reason for resigning is that her husband is suffering from cancer. But I think, looking at it more broadly, I think she was out of the decision-making loop, and she didn't fit with Trump's kind of changed philosophy as president.
So the influence of anti-war figures within Trump's circle then is waning all of the time, I guess, is it?
Yeah, I think it is. And we've seen, we've mentioned figures like Tucker Carlson before. Gabbard is another one, Marjorie Taylor Greene. All of them have come out strongly in opposition to the Iran war and in opposition to Israel, but increasingly they're being sidelined. And I don't really know where the MAGA movement is now in relation to that. It's hard to get public sentiment. I guess we will see with the midterms later in the year. That will act, I think, as a barometer of where sentiment is within the Republican Party. But ultimately, it's quite remarkable, because having campaigned on issues such as domestic inflation, immigration, Trump has now evolved into a foreign policy president. He doesn't seem all that interested in the domestic issues, and he's paying more attention to the wider global landscape than he is the American landscape at home. So that just, you could speculate that is something to do with his ego. I've heard he wants to be talked about in terms of figures like Napoleon, etc., etc. And you can see how that would play into his thinking.
So it's more about legacy, really, than domestic policy at the moment, is it?
Yeah, I think that's a good characterisation. I think he is looking at his legacy. The focus might shift again in advance of the midterms. He might start putting a renewed focus on domestic issues in order to try and retain either the House or the Senate. But for now, he is very much, I won't say distracted, but focused on his foreign policy agenda and on implementing his foreign policy agenda.
Can we talk about the Irish Aid Flotilla, the detainees even there? They flew home at the weekend, Thomas, but a huge amount of outcry about their treatment and the like. Yeah,
and I should start by saying, there was a Tipperary native involved in this. Her name is Tara Sheehy, a Nina native. She's currently living in Spain, and that's about as much as I know of her. But she was one of 14 Irish citizens, 12 of whom arrived back to Dublin Airport on Saturday. After, to summarise it, their aid flotilla was intercepted in international waters and taken to the Israeli port of Ashdod, where they were subsequently mistreated, and all kinds of accusations have been made and levelled at the Israeli forces. I think the most striking component of it all was the images, the video that circulated of the Israeli far-right Minister for National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, taunting the activists who were kind of in stressed positions on the floor of a room. And that obviously prompted widespread international outcry. You had Giorgia Meloni was first out, condemned it. Obviously, the Taoiseach condemned it, and various other Western ministers, Western heads of state. Even the Israeli or the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, probably one of the staunchest defenders of Israel out there, he even denounced Ben-Gvir for his actions. So that will tell you how much damage he's done.
Is Mr. Gvir, is he playing for votes at this point in Israel?
Yeah, this would very much, I make no bones about it. He's been widely called a racist, and I think it's quite clear he is. he is far right. He brokered a deal with Netanyahu in 2022 to get into government and was given the Ministry of National Security. And he has wielded that very forcefully. You know, he has effectively done what he likes in position, but he is playing to a certain component of the electorate within Israeli politics. And I mentioned there the election coming up, and that will probably sit well from them. You know, he's seen as a domestic strongman who champions the cause of Israel, and you know, will have probably won himself a few votes by doing what he did last week, even as horrendous as it was. And I think it has inflicted more damage on Israel's reputation. Israel's reputation is already severely damaged. But I mean, the fact that Netanyahu even had to come out and denounce him, the fact that Huckabee came out and denounced him, will tell you just how serious the damage was. But at the end of the day, he probably is playing to a certain element. I'm not saying all Israelis are like this, but you know, there's a certain cohort of the base. I think it's about 7% of the electorate who voted for him, and that will probably make them cheer.
Can we move to Beijing then, and very much split-screen diplomacy there, because just a few short days after Donald Trump being there, Putin turns up.
Yeah, and the war in Ukraine trundling on as we speak, them exchanging fire, Russia and Ukraine, over the course of the past week. But it was very interesting. Aside from the whole pomp and pageantry element of it, I mean, they were taken to the Great Hall of the People and various other sites within China. Both Trump and Putin were given almost identical treatment. But I think the tone and the body language was different because, believe it or not, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping had met over 40 times. Which is an extraordinary, their relationship is extraordinary, and it's a very close relationship at this time. I think the purpose of the Trump visit was to stabilise the relationship between the US and China, the two superpowers, and largely to de-escalate from everything to trade to semiconductors, critical minerals, etc. And then Putin's visit last week was kind of more of a celebration. A kind of an illustration of the personal bond between the two leaders. And it was very interesting in that regard. It is a close personal bond. I mean, China is effectively propping up Russia with military hardware and dual-use components in relation to the war in Ukraine. So there's a huge reliance on it. And the two leaders came out of the couple of days with 20 signed documents, a number of economic deals. No deal on probably the most significant economic aspect of the trip, which was a gas pipeline from China, or from basically in the Siberia region. There was no finalised agreement on that. So that was probably a little bit of a letdown on both sides. But still, there was no joint communique, no joint statement from the Trump visit the week before. So that was, I think, a representation of how different the relationship is between the two, or between the three countries.
It's probably the only piece of dissent directly there, though, was where the defence spend in Europe was concerned. The Chinese leader, he distanced himself a little from Putin's take on that.
Yeah, and I think there's probably, I think he probably has Taiwan in mind when he said that. I mean, yeah, he because China is obviously building up its military arsenal. It has its eyes on Taiwan, and that was in the headlines the week before. But I think Xi Jinping had that in mind when he made those comments. He distanced himself from the European military build-up. And while he is willing to support Vladimir Putin and on the war in Ukraine to an extent, I don't think he's entirely comfortable with it. China is never comfortable with instability at the end of the day. I mean, global instability, what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the Iran war is unsettling for it, largely because it has kind of an export-oriented trade model. And when the world economy is not doing well, China's exports aren't doing as well. And so it feeds through to the domestic economy. So, it's an interesting dilemma the country finds itself in. But, I mean, make no mistake about it. I mean, China is now the chief superpower alongside the United States. Vladimir Putin will want to see his relationship with China as a partnership of equals. I don't think it is. I think China is far stronger. I mean, are becoming far stronger, at least certainly in economic terms. And while Russia is still a formidable military, China is quickly advancing in that regard.
And speaking of China, there was that explosion in the coal mine there as well, and lots of people killed, unfortunately, in that.
Shocking explosion. Yeah, in up to 80, above 80 people, in fact, killed in an explosion in a coal mine in northern China, in Shanxi province. Now, it's worth noting that China has traditionally relied on coal as a source of power, and as we discussed before, it has diversified away from that. It has shut thousands of coal mines in recent years, and safety has been improved. But I suppose this just underlines that there are still huge dangers associated with this type of power, and that was illustrated on Friday when this news broke. It's a shocking tragedy, and Xi Jinping has said the lessons must be learned. But at the end of the day, over 82 people killed. It's a sad news story.
And the World Health Organization, Thomas, raising the threat from the Democratic Republic of Congo's Ebola breakout from high to very high. And again, this is very concerning, isn't it?
Yeah, this is very concerning. We touched on this with Stephen last week, particularly with the trauma of COVID and then the hantavirus outbreak. But yeah, the number of deaths now is touching 200. The number of cases is now up to 900. And while scientists are working on a vaccine for the disease, it's not expected to be ready for several more months. So it is hugely concerning. There's no doubt about it. Congo is ravaged by instability itself. There's an insurgency from Rwanda in the east of the country, so it's dealing with its own political situation, and obviously that affects the healthcare response. When the country is in the grips of instability and fighting, the healthcare response is not going to be as effective. So it is quite concerning. I don't think it's a danger to the world at large, but still, it is very worrying.
Thomas, good to talk to you as always, and thanks for your time this morning. Thank you. Good morning to you. That's Thomas Conway there from the Nina Guardian with our global news slot. 1800 938 007.
Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Hook On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Hook On. See slatterysgarage.ie.